the Minnesota story just seems to just continue to erode as there seems to be more and more information and more independent journalists that are on the case. So much so now that the DHS, Department of Homeland Security, has deployed agents to many of these sites, which seem to be colluding in part of the fraud scheme, upwards of $9 billion. And this really comes out of some really interesting reporting.
That's right.
Like a viral video, if you will.
Both the FBI and Department of Homeland Security are surging resources to Minnesota to investigate the allegations of fraud there. We heard about fraud through the COVID program. Right. The fraud programs through the COVID system, through Medicaid and all of those issues. Now we're starting to see cracks in another area of resource and assistance that is state-run and federal dollars, and that is around the daycare system. Now, this is something that in Minnesota, apparently some daycares had been charged. Some people had been charged for fraudulent billing some years ago. But now this independent journalist, YouTube creator, Nick Shirley, did kind of an expose that broke over the Christmas holiday of him going to these centers. One famously now misspelled learning in the name, Quality Learning Center. It said Quality Leering Center. And they have just, when they go to these places, there were no children. And that has prompted even more allegations of if this fraud scheme is going on.
We have a clip. Let's take a look at this. Let's go bite 6.
I knocked on the door, and to my surprise, somebody actually answered the door. Hello? Can we speak? Yeah. I would like to check a child in the daycare. Why? Can I speak to a manager? Where can I get paperwork to file for my son? I wanted to put my son Joey in daycare. And after a few questions, the lady went silent. Looks like little Joey Shirley ain't going to daycare here.
There's plenty of more versions of this you could see as they continue to uncover more and more. Now, look, the first question I had, well, is this because it's over Christmas break? Is this something that they, kind of set up here to show? But the answer to that seems to be no, that he's been doing this investigation for quite some time.
And what we're also seeing is that now some of these individuals seem to be trying to play catch up, like that famous one that had the misspelled name, where neighbors had even said they had never seen children there. A state official tried to say it wasn't even open anymore. And then all of a sudden today, 20 children are there.
It's just really, I think, another one of those illuminating moments where people can see when they start realizing that we're talking about the billions and the multi-billions, how government waste does get out of hand. It's sort of a shame that something like the Doge department, not necessarily that it doesn't exist, it clearly still exists, still running in some ways, but sort of those early days aren't necessarily going as much as they were, because this is where I really want them to step in.
And this is something that even appeared to be investigated by local media in Minnesota about 10 years ago as well, where there was even people would go, sign their children in, get a kickback from centers, and leave with the children so that they could bill the government for the services. Some of these daycare centers that were visited by this independent journalist, they were getting millions of dollars in taxpayer money to provide these services. And when they were visited, there was no one there. Now, it is incumbent upon the federal investigators that are there to figure out the truth, to find out whether or not they are fraudulently billing, whether or not they are breaking laws, and to prosecute them to the fullest extent. But what I think is so telling is that the governor's office issued a statement to Fox News.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that this is all fake, we have looked into this, yada, yada, yada. They gave a mea culpa, like, we are not to blame here kind of statement.
Not fake. Yeah.
They said that the governor has worked for years to crack down on fraud and asked the state legislature for more authority to take aggressive action. He has strengthened oversight. So one, he's already trying to push it. Maybe it's the legislature's fault for not giving me more authority. But two, trying to say he has been strong in this. I want to contrast that with what we heard from the Assistant U.S. Attorney Joe Thompson just before Christmas. We played this soundbite because this was still talking about the food centers and the food fraud and the fraudulent billing and all that, where he had said of the $18 billion that had federally gone to Minnesota, about half of that was taken fraudulently. So $9 billion of taxpayer dollars were stolen, wasted. But here's what he had to say. And I think it was very telling that this statement came before what this journalist is putting out there, because it's illuminating. Let's go ahead and play Bite 2, Joe Thompson, Assistant U.S. Attorney.
And taxpayers deserve to know the truth of the fraud. The fraud is not small. It isn't isolated. The magnitude cannot be overstated. What we see in Minnesota is not a handful of bad actors committing crimes. It's a staggering industrial scale fraud. It's swamping Minnesota and calling into question everything we know about our state.
That's from the Department of Justice. It's a assistant U.S. attorney that has started looking into this. Now that you know the FBI is surging resources, and Kash Patel even said we were surging resources when these first allegations came out, even before this video went viral with over 126 million views on X and over 2 million views on YouTube. They were already sending resources there. We know Department of Homeland Security is sending resources there. Not just Department of Homeland Security, not just for immigration enforcement, but to investigate how this fraud was taking place among immigrant communities as well. This is a big deal. And I think that we almost thought this story would kind of go away with the news cycle, right? You have the shocking numbers that came out. First, it was the $250 million from one organization that was stealing COVID money to provide meals, and they were fraudulently billing that. Then it comes that, they're saying it's a lot wider, a lot more widespread. Now there's another layer going into that these daycare centers could be potentially a piece of this as well. It is showing a state in the United States that has lost all control of the fiscal arms of being able to control where money's going. And what is it doing? It's not helping the citizens, helping Americans. It's enriching thieves and fraudsters. No, and that's a problem.
You may not agree with the idea of a social program like this, but you may still want, well, if I'm going to have to do it, I'd like it to at least be going to, childcare, and not have a bunch of shell childcare companies that are just receiving funds for no work.
Conservatives still talk about it this way. We're still discussing whether or not a program is good to fund because of political ideology. Do we think a welfare program is going to actually help bring people out of poverty, or is it going to keep them trapped in a cycle of poverty? That's the old argument that we would have with members of the other ideology. Is not that we didn't think that people needed help. It's just that by just giving away money, it doesn't actually help people out of poverty in the way that it's supposed to. I mean, that's why Bill Clinton was able to pass welfare reform in the 90s, because that was the debate. The debate was, let's make it so that if we're going to be helping people, it at least gives them a pathway out of it. That's no longer even the discussion. Now the discussion is, should we just be throwing this money? You can't even question it. And we're not even going to make sure it's going to try and help, but you're not allowed to question it.